Hey everyone! This is a quick reminder to subscribe and hit that like button. It lets me know that you are enjoying my content. Also, feel free to drop your suggestions for future stories in the comments below. Thank you for listening, and let's dive right in. I never planned on working 2 jobs, but here I was, standing in an empty ice rink at nearly midnight, shivering in my work boots. The rink belonged to my cousin Matt. He'd owned it for years, ever since he took over from the previous owner, but business had slowed down lately. Public skates during the day, hockey practices in the evenings, and after that, well, someone had to clean up. That's where I came in. I work as a truck driver most days. Long hours, decent pay, but not enough. Gas prices were high, bills were stacking up, and when Matt mentioned he needed a night worker to run the Zamboni and clean the rink, I figured, why not? The job was easy money. Or at least, it should have been. The place looked different at night. Too quiet, too empty. No screaming kids, no pucks slamming against the boards, no music echoing through the speakers. Just the dull hum of the overhead lights and the faint creak of the old bleachers settling. Matt was waiting for me by the Zamboni, arms crossed. "Appreciate you doing this, Cal," he said, tossing me the keys. "No problem," I replied, rolling my shoulders. "I just drive the Zamboni, right? Easy enough." He nodded, but something in his expression was off. "Yeah, but there are a few things you gotta follow." And then he gave me the rules. Never check the Zamboni's water tank. If there's an extra set of footprints, don't follow them. If the Zamboni starts moving on its own, leave immediately. Never stay past 3 a.m. The rink isn't ours after that. I laughed, expecting him to crack a grin and tell me he was messing with me. But he didn't. "That last one, seriously," he added, voice firm. "No matter what, just get your work done and leave before 3. I snorted, pocketing the keys. "Sure thing, boss," but a pit formed in my stomach as I looked around the rink again. This place had history. Everyone in town knew it. Years ago, our local hockey team had gone missing. All of them. A full roster of teenage players just gone after a late-night practice. No bodies, no notes, nothing. People assumed they ran away, got into trouble, or something worse happened. The only thing anyone knew for sure? They were last seen here. I didn't believe in ghost stories, but standing alone in the middle of that rink, I felt something. The air was too cold. Not the kind of cold you expect in an ice rink, but the kind that settles in your bones, the kind that makes your breath come out too thick, too visible. I shivered and shook it off. "All right," I muttered, climbing onto the Zamboni. "Let's get this over with." I turned the key, and the machine roared to life. But as I drove forward, I could have sworn I saw something shift beneath the ice. A dark shape, just for a second. Then it was gone. By my 3rd week on the job, I had settled into the routine. Show up, run the Zamboni, clean up, go home. Nothing weird, nothing out of the ordinary. Just me, an empty rink, and the low hum of the machines. The rules? I hadn't thought much about them since that first night. Matt's warnings still lingered in my mind, but when nothing happened, I figured they were just a scare tactic, a way to mess with me. And then, on one particular night, that changed. I had just finished my last pass over the ice, the Zamboni gliding smoothly across the surface, leaving behind a perfect glassy sheen. The place looked peaceful. Empty bleachers, still air, the low buzz of the overhead lights. I climbed off the machine, stretched my arms, and took a step toward the exit. That's when I saw them. Bloody skate marks, long, jagged streaks of deep red cut through the ice, slicing across the fresh surface I had just cleaned. The trail started near the center of the rink and curved sharply, like someone had been skating fast, too fast, before wiping out. My stomach clenched. I had just resurfaced the ice. There shouldn't be anything on it, let alone blood. I swallowed hard, scanning the rink. No one was here. I was alone. A metallic taste filled my mouth as my heart hammered. The marks were too clear to be an illusion, too deep to be a reflection. I forced myself to move, my boots echoing against the boards as I made my way to the security office. The tiny room was cramped, a mess of filing cabinets, an old desk, and a wall of grainy monitors showing different angles of the rink. I rewound the footage. The cameras flickered as I scanned through the last half hour. Nothing. The ice was clean, untouched, just as it should be. Then, I fast-forwarded, and the footage glitched. At exactly 3 a.m., the recording stuttered and skipped. The video jumped forward 5 minutes, completely cutting out whatever happened during that time. I stared at the screen, gripping the desk so hard my knuckles turned white. The blood was there now, in the footage, clear as day. But there was no sign of how it got there. I exhaled sharply, pushing myself away from the monitor. My brain raced, trying to find an explanation. Maybe the Zamboni had scraped up old stains buried in the ice? Maybe it was just a malfunction with the camera? Yeah, had to be. A sharp sound cut through the silence, and I froze. Skates. The unmistakable scrape of steel against ice. Slow, deliberate, just outside the office. I didn't turn around, I didn't breathe. The sound dragged closer, one long stroke, then another, then it stopped. I forced myself to move, stepping into the hall and looking toward the rink. Nothing. The ice was empty. The bloody skate marks were still there, so was that glaring under the bright overhead lights. But there were no footprints, no doors open, no sign that anyone else had ever been here. I locked up the rink that night faster than I ever had before. By the time I came back the next night, the bloody skate marks were gone, like they had never been there at all. I told myself I wouldn't let it get to me. The bloody skate marks, the phantom scraping sounds, it was probably just my mind playing tricks on me. Working alone at night, in a rink with a notorious history? Of course, my imagination would run wild. That's what I told myself. But 2 weeks passed and the unease never quite went away. Every shift, I'd catch myself glancing at the ice a little too often, waiting for the marks to return. They never did. Still, I worked faster, eager to finish and leave before 3 a.m. And then, one night, I couldn't leave at all. It started like any other shift. I resurfaced the ice, locked up the maintenance closet, and grabbed my bag from the security office. It was 2:45 a.m., and I was ahead of schedule. I made my way to the side exit near the staff parking lot, shoving the door open, and stepped back into the rink. I froze. The cold air hit me first, that sharp, biting chill of the ice. The overhead lights stretched long shadows across the empty bleachers. I turned on my heel, heart hammering, and pushed through the door again. Same result. I was back inside. A sickening sense of déjà vu twisted in my stomach. I tried the front entrance next, the same one I had walked through hours ago. I pushed the heavy doors open, bracing for the cold night air. But instead, I stepped right back into the ice rink. My breath came short and fast now. I ran to the fire exit near the back, practically slamming my shoulder into the door. The hallway outside stretched into the rink. I backed up, hands shaking. What the hell was happening? The low hum of the building filled my ears. The buzzing lights, the distant clank of the ventilation system. Everything was still. Then I heard it, a mechanical whir, a slow, steady rumble of an engine turning over. The Zamboni. I turned toward the machine bay just in time to see the heavy doors sliding open on their own. The Zamboni lurched forward, rolling slowly onto the ice. No driver, no one behind the controls. My pulse pounded in my ears. The machine picked up speed, cutting across the rink in a wide, deliberate arc. Its massive weight rumbled over the smooth ice, its headlights burning through the foggy cold. And then, it turned toward me. I bolted. My boots slammed against the floor as I sprinted across the lobby, throwing open another door. Rink. Again. The Zamboni's engine growled, the sound growing louder, closer. I spun back toward the machine just in time to see something floating in its water tank. A shape, dark, fabric-like, a glove. I stumbled backward, my body running cold. The glove bobbed against the surface as the Zamboni rolled past. A hockey glove. Nope, 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 nope. I wasn't sticking around to see what happened next. With one last desperate attempt, I sprinted toward the locker room door, shoving through it, and found myself standing in the staff parking lot. The outside world hit me all at once. The cool, open air, the quiet hum of distant streetlights, the weight of normalcy pressing back into my lungs. I spun around. The rink was behind me, just as it should have been. The door I had just stepped through, it didn't exist. There was only solid concrete where the door should have been. I stood there for a long time, my breath coming in shaky bursts. Then, without another glance back, I climbed into my truck and sped home. That night, I barely slept. By the time morning hit, I was half convinced I had dreamed it all up, that exhaustion was messing with me. So before my next shift, I went back to the security office and pulled up the footage from the night before. I fast-forwarded through the shift. Everything looked normal. No disappearing doors, no possessed Zamboni, no. The screen flickered. I froze, fingers hovering over the keyboard. The footage glitched for a second. Then, one frame. A single frozen image, flickering for half a second before the tape jumped forward. It was the missing hockey team. All of them. They were on the ice, but something was wrong. Their movements were unnatural, warped, as if they were caught mid-motion in a way the human body wasn't meant to bend. Their faces were blurred, smeared in the distortion of the frame. They looked like they were skating in a frenzy, circling something at the center of the rink. And then, they were gone. The tape continued as if nothing had happened. I stared at the screen, my skin crawling. I rewound, played it again, same thing. Just one frame, a blink, a glitch, no evidence. Nothing I could show Matt, nothing I could explain. I sat back in my chair, swallowing hard. For the first time, I thought about quitting, but instead, I showed up for my next shift, because now, I needed answers. I didn't go to Matt right away. After what I saw on the security footage, the flickering image of the missing team, their bodies bent at unnatural angles, I needed time to think, to process. But after a week of nothing happening, my fear started twisting into something else. Suspicion. I couldn't shake the feeling that Matt knew more than he let on. The rules, the way he always seemed tense when he talked about the rink. None of it felt like a coincidence anymore. So before my next shift, I went looking for answers. Matt was in his office, hunched over some paperwork when I barged in. He barely looked up. "You look like hell," he muttered, scribbling something down. "Yeah? Wonder why." I crossed my arms. "We need to talk." He sighed, finally glancing up at me. "About what?" I clenched my jaw. "About this place. About the things I've been seeing, the doors that don't lead outside. The Zamboni moving on its own, the bloody skate marks that disappear the next day." His expression didn't change. If anything, he just looked tired. "Callie," he started, his voice slower now, more careful. "You're working night shifts alone in an old-ass building. It's bound to mess with your head." I narrowed my eyes. "Right. And what about the security footage?" That got his attention. His grip on the pen tightened. "What about it?" I hesitated. Saying it out loud felt ridiculous. I saw something, just a frame, but it was there, the missing hockey team on the ice. His face went pale. Not much, but enough. For the first time, I saw something in his expression that wasn't just exhaustion, it was fear. I stepped closer. "Matt, what happened here?" He exhaled through his nose and stood up. "You don't want to know." "Bullshit." My voice was sharper than I intended. "If I'm working here, I deserve to know." "You're imagining things." His voice was tight, dismissive. He ran a hand through his hair. "You're overtired, probably drinking too much coffee. Just follow the damn rules and you'll be fine." He was lying. I knew it. "You're scared," I said, watching him carefully. "Why?" He tensed but didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed his coat, brushed past me, and muttered, "Don't break the rules, Callie. Just do your job and go home." That night, I didn't break the rules, but I still saw something I wasn't supposed to. It started just past 1 a.m. while I was clearing the ice. I was halfway through a pass when I heard it, cheering. Faint, distant, like a crowd watching a game. The sound rose in waves, as if an invisible audience was reacting to something happening on the ice. Cheers, whistles, the occasional burst of applause. I cut the engine and sat there, gripping the Zamboni's wheel. The stands were empty. I stepped off the machine slowly, my boots hitting the ice with a dull scrape. The sound of the crowd didn't fade, it grew louder. I turned toward the glass, toward the reflection of the rink. And that's when I saw them. The stands were full. Not in real life, those were still empty. But in the ice's reflection, the bleachers were packed with shadowy figures, seated shoulder to shoulder. The reflection was warped, almost like looking into a funhouse mirror. Some of the figures shifted unnaturally, their movements jerky and wrong. Others sat completely still, staring straight ahead, as if they were waiting for something. My skin crawled. I lifted my gaze away from the reflection, back to the actual bleachers. Empty. I looked back down at the ice. The stands were still full. And then, I saw Matt. In the reflection, he was sitting in the front row, his hands clasped together like he was watching an intense play. I whipped my head around to look at the real stands. No one was there. I looked back at the ice. Matt's reflection turned to look at me. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. The reflection of the crowd began to shift, their heads turning, dozens of shadowed figures snapping their attention toward me. The lights overhead flickered. The sound of the cheering cut off, leaving a ringing silence in my ears. I bolted. Didn't even finish my shift. I grabbed my keys, ran for the staff exit, and didn't stop moving until I was locked inside my truck. For the first time since I started this job, I felt real, primal fear. And for the first time I was certain Matt knew exactly what was happening here. I couldn't let it go. The reflection in the ice, the cheering from an empty crowd, and worst of all, Matt was in the reflection. But not in real life. I didn't sleep that night, didn't eat much the next day either. I just sat in my truck, replaying the memory over and over. Matt was hiding something, and I needed to know what. By the time my next shift rolled around, I had a plan. I was going to search the ice. I arrived a little before midnight, giving myself extra time before I had to resurface the rink. The air inside was bitter cold, heavier than usual, and the silence stretched unnaturally. I grabbed a scraper tool from the maintenance closet and stepped onto the ice. My breath came out in thick clouds as I knelt down near center rink. The surface was smooth, perfect, too perfect. I scraped the blade against the ice. A thin layer flaked away, harmless. I kept going. My fingers stiffened from the cold as I dug deeper, carving a shallow indentation. A faint shape started to emerge beneath the layers. Not a body, something small. I scraped faster, my heart racing. Finally, my glove caught on something solid. I reached down, prying it loose from the frozen grip of the ice. A ring. I turned it over in my palm, the metal dull with age, but the engraving on the inside was still visible. A set of initials, and I knew those initials. Everyone in town did. It belonged to one of the missing hockey players. I dropped the ring like it had burned me, staggering back. My breath came short and shallow, my hands shaking. They were here. The realization settled in my bones like ice water. The team never left. They were here. Underneath the ice, a whisper slithered through the cold air, curling around my ears like breath against my skin. Low, distorted, inhuman. I whipped my head around. No one was there, but the whisper came again. Faint, broken words. I strained to listen, but they were garbled, lost in the air like voices underwater. A shiver crawled down my spine, and I stumbled to my feet, shoving the ring into my pocket. I needed proof. I needed more. That night, I locked myself in the security office, pulled up the surveillance footage, and started going through past recordings. For 2 hours, I found nothing. Just empty ice, normal shifts, the occasional late-night skater from weeks ago. Then, at exactly 3 a.m., I saw it. Another glitch in the footage. Just like before, the screen flickered, skipping forward. But this time, when I rewound and played it frame by frame, I caught another glimpse of them. The hockey team. Their faces were clearer now, and they looked terrified. Their bodies were hunched, their heads snapping toward the camera like they knew they were being watched. One of them, the captain, was mid-motion, his hands up like he was trying to stop something, trying to escape. The screen flashed and the frame was gone. The footage played on like nothing had happened. I sat back, my heart hammering. There was no doubt now. Something had happened to them, but I still didn't know what. And until I found out, I couldn't tell anyone. Not yet. I should have stopped. By now, I had seen enough. The ring in the ice, the ghostly crowd, the distorted footage, it all pointed to the same conclusion. The missing hockey team had never left. But I couldn't let it go. Not yet. Because there was still one question gnawing at me, keeping me up at night, making my skin crawl every time I stepped into the rink. What happened to them? And more importantly, what did Matt have to do with it? The next few weeks I dug deeper, and the rink gave up its secrets. I started checking places I hadn't before. Closets, storage rooms, maintenance areas that hadn't been touched in years. That's when I found them. Personal belongings. Shoved haphazardly into the back of the maintenance room, hidden behind old spare parts for the Zamboni. I pulled out a jacket first. The fabric was stiff, like it had been left damp for too long before drying in a crumpled heap. A number was stitched onto the sleeve. NAR 19, the same as the missing team's captain. My stomach turned. Next, I found a hockey stick, broken clean in half, the wood splintered like it had been snapped over someone's knee. More things. A watch, a keychain, a torn piece of a jersey, still sticky with something dark. Every item belonged to one of the missing players. Matt knew. He'd known the whole damn time. The smell was what finally got to me. The Zamboni's water tank had always had an odd scent, something stale, something off, but I had never thought much of it, until the night I finally opened it. I wasn't supposed to. That was rule number 1. But after everything else, screw the rules. I lifted the hatch and the stench hit me like a brick wall. Rot. Something old and damp, something that had been sitting in water for too long. I gagged, stepping back, eyes watering. I didn't need to look inside. I already knew. I had enough now. Enough to know that whatever had happened, Matt was involved. But I needed proof. So I went back to the security office. I pulled up the footage from weeks ago, from the night I first saw the glitch. I replayed the part where the team was on the ice, their bodies twisted and unnatural. I stared at it, frame by frame, and then the footage changed. I didn't rewind, didn't touch the keyboard. It changed on its own. The team was gone. Instead, I saw Matt, walking across the ice, calm. I watched as he locked the doors from the inside. I watched as he turned toward the team, who were standing there, frozen, their faces pale. They weren't attacking each other. They weren't possessed. They were scared. I felt my breath hitch as Matt took another step toward them, something dark in his hands. And then, the video cut out. Looking for something? The voice was behind me. I jumped, slamming my knee into the desk as I spun around. Matt. Standing in the doorway, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "You shouldn't be in here, Callie," he said, his voice dangerously low. I swallowed hard, my pulse hammering. "You did this." His eyes flicked to the monitor, where the frame of him locking the doors was still frozen on screen. His jaw clenched. For the first time since I started working here, he wasn't trying to hide it anymore. "You don't understand," he muttered, stepping forward. I moved back instinctively, pressing against the desk. "I know you were involved," I said, my voice shaking. "I know the team never left. I know." "You know nothing," Matt snapped, cutting me off. His face twisted, something dark flashing behind his eyes. I had to get out. I darted for the door, but he blocked my way. His hands clenched into fists. I wasn't getting out of this room unless he let me, but I wasn't going down without a fight. I squared my shoulders, meeting his glare head-on. "You killed them, didn't you?" I said. For a long moment he didn't answer. Then, a slow, cruel smile, and I knew. Matt had murdered the hockey team. And now he was going to make sure I never left this rink alive. Matt took a step toward me, and I knew. He wasn't going to let me leave. The security footage was still frozen on the screen behind me, evidence that he had locked the hockey team inside the rink that night, that he had walked toward them with something in his hands. But it wasn't enough. He could still get rid of me, make it all disappear. "I should have never let you work here," he muttered, his voice dangerously low. My heart pounded. I glanced at the door, weighing my chances of getting past him. Not good. I reached for my phone, but he was faster. His hand slammed against my wrist, knocking it away. It skidded across the floor, disappearing under the desk. I barely had time to react before he lunged at me. I dodged, barely, his fingers grazing my jacket as I stumbled back against the desk. My hand shot out, knocking over a stack of papers, sending them flying to the ground. Matt was stronger than me. If he got a good grip, I wouldn't be able to fight him off. I had to be faster. He grabbed for me again, and I threw my weight into him, shoving him back just enough to break free. I ran, heart hammering, ripping the door open. And the temperature dropped. Not normal cold. Not rink cold. Something else. A deep, bone-chilling freeze that sucked the air from my lungs. Matt stopped mid-step, his breath coming out in thick, slow clouds. The lights overhead flickered. The ice, visible through the plexiglass, fogged over like something was breathing from underneath. And then, the whispers came. Low, layered, growing. Matt's expression changed. He turned, eyes darting wildly around the rink. He took a slow step back. "No," he whispered. "Not now." A sharp crack echoed through the empty arena. Then another, a sound like skates carving into the ice, but deeper, heavier. The fog thickened, rolling over the surface like a storm creeping in. And then, they appeared. The hockey team. All of them. Their figures materialized through the mist, half real, half shadow. Their jerseys ripped, stained, frozen, their faces hidden in the cold. But their eyes, black voids, endless and empty, locked onto Matt. He let out a strangled sound. "I did what I had to do," he shouted, backing away from the glass. "It wasn't supposed to." The ghosts moved as one. They surged forward, their skates never touching the ice, their bodies flickering like something out of a broken reel of film. Matt turned to run. He didn't make it. They reached him in seconds. His scream barely had time to escape his throat before they tore into him. I stumbled back, slamming against the wall as the air crackled with something dark, something electric. The shadows of the team pulled him into the ice, their hands clawing at his arms, his shoulders, his throat. His body twisted, contorted, his mouth open in a silent scream, and then he was gone. The fog lifted. The rink was empty again. Nothing remained of Matt, just the faint sound of skates scraping across the ice. I called 911. When the police arrived, I gave them everything. The ring I found in the ice, the remains in the Zamboni's water tank, the security footage showing Matt locking the doors the night the team vanished. I told them he was responsible, that he had hidden the truth for years. I left out the ghosts, because who would believe that? They found enough real evidence to confirm Matt's guilt, even without my full story. His name was all over the news. The town finally had closure. The families of the missing players finally had answers. But the rink, it wasn't finished. I came back one last time, not as an employee, just to see it. The doors had been locked up for investigation, but standing outside, looking through the glass, I swore I could see something moving in the distance. The ice was smooth, untouched. But then, scrape, the faint sound of skates cutting across the rink. No one was there, not in real life, but in the reflection of the glass, the team was still practicing. Forever.